Well, Friday night's matchup had all of the makings for a prize fight between the Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics, and it certainly didn't disappoint. It's a wine and gold winner, and the Cavs Insider Podcast is here for you, breaking it all down. Coming up next. Well, how we doing? One of these days I'll get that correct intro to roll on the right. I literally just said it a second ago, but we are coming at you from I look down and I see Cavs Insider and I want to click the first thing that I see. And the actual podcast trailer is not labeled Cavs Insider, as shocking as that might be. So maybe I should get on that and potentially fix it. Regardless, John Rudder, Spencer German with you here, breaking down a wild win in Boston last night and evaluating how the Cavs are looking just 5 games into the season, but the early sample size and the early results got to have Cavs fans excited for what could potentially be this year. And oh yeah, by the way, all of this has happened so far without Darius Garland. So plenty to talk about and plenty to break down as we chat with you here over the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. But Spence, we'll just dive right into it. Big win last night, overtime, and 2 guys popping off for 41 points. I got to admit, it was a little bit of a roller coaster, up 13, down 15, but hey, they pulled it out in the end.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 2 guys going for 41. I think if you had said Donovan Mitchell and one other player are going to go off for 41 against the Celtics on Friday, and guess who the other person is? I think most fans probably would have said, like, oh, maybe Evan Mobley, like big breakout game for him. Like, oh, maybe Darius Garland's back and he goes off for 41. I don't know that many people are going to tab Caris LeVert as the other guy to go for 41 against the Celtics. But, what a performance. Mitchell obviously has been as advertised for these first 5 games. So him going for 41, it was impressive. But you almost were like, LeVert's performance almost superseded Mitchell's. And that I think it was so unexpected from him. But this is, just to kind of start there specifically for LeVert, like, this is the guy who I think Cavs fans were hoping they were getting at the trade deadline last year, a guy who can go off like this on any given night and put up some big numbers, and you just didn't see it last year. I think there was a couple reasons for that. I think, just trying to kind of get acclimated to a new team, new city, new environment. That can always be hard, but also the injury. I mean, he was injured as he played a couple games, got injured, missed a stretch of games, then came back in right before the play-in games kind of started. And I just don't think he really had time to get his footing. Now you give him an entire summer to acclimate to Cleveland, get comfortable, figure out his role on this team, and you add Donovan Mitchell into the mix, who's going to obviously demand a lot of attention, and that opened up him to make some shots and do some things. And I listened to, JB Bickerstaff's in locker room sort of speech he gave, and he said, like, Caris, like, this is a testament to you, man. Like, your teammates have always said, like, be you, take your shots, do your thing. And with Darius Garland out of the lineup, he got a chance to really come out and do that last night. And the fact that his teammates still have confidence in him, even though he's obviously had some shaky games at times or been inconsistent, is great. And the fact that he hasn't really lost his identity is great. And he seems to be finding his role and fitting in nicely. So, heck of a performance from him. I think that was maybe the thing that popped out the most was just like, man, we got ourselves a Caris LeVert game going for 41 here, early stretch of the season, on top of the fact that it leads to a big win over the Celtics.
Yeah, and as I was writing last night, I almost kind of felt bad because I was writing so much about Caris LeVert, and then I realized, like, oh yeah, like Donovan scored 41 as well. Like, don't forget about this guy. But he's been so impressive through his first 5 games as a Cavalier. It's almost like ho-hum. We expect 30 points a night from him, right? Like, we know what we're going to get with Donovan, capable of taking things over on any given night. But I'm thrilled to see that production and that game from Caris LeVert last night. And he had credited, his offseason training, going the keto route. And he even said that, he had some injuries lingering around from his time in Indiana that may have potentially impacted him, perhaps more than we even thought. So we saw the explosiveness. We saw the ability to knock down perimeter shots. These are all things that we knew he brought to the table. We wanted to see it. It was certainly on full display last night. Really thrilled with the performance. This was kind of like the litmus test game, right? Like, we thought that this could be a game that the Cavs would come in, measure up against one of the better teams that we thought was going to be in the Eastern Conference this year. This is the reigning Eastern Conference champions. We knew that they were going to be without Darius Garland, but I think that this was a chance to really see what they were made of. kind of a little dicey at times. And I thought that Boston might, after that first quarter, it seemed like they weathered that first punch from Cleveland, and they kind of righted themselves. And then, Jason Tatum kind of started to take over. Jaylen Brown was scoring, and it looked like they were just going to flex their offensive muscle. But like, maybe I shouldn't be surprised that Cleveland was also able to rebound, because they wear it on their chest, be the scrap. They were going to come to work.
Yeah, it's you mentioned that scrap point, and I think that's important just because with how much JB mentions that in his post-game press conferences, they have the chain that they give out after the game that goes to the guy who had the most scrap in the game. Obviously, Levert got it on Friday night. That's kind of the identity that he wants the team to take on. And this game, as well as others I'm sure we'll see throughout the season, sort of embodies that mentality, right? Like, they got off to a great start. I think people were watching that game, from the jump, thinking like, oh, okay, like Cleveland came to play. Like, this team's for real. Like, they're going right out there and punching the Celtics in the mouth a little bit. And then the Celtics, being the great team that they are, the defending Eastern Conference champs, as you mentioned, they came right back and did what they do, and they took a double-digit lead into the half, and you kind of felt like, okay, maybe like Cleveland just isn't ready to beat this team yet, right? That was kind of the feel at halftime. But man, like that, again, the scrap of this team, they came out in the second half, they battled and they just kind of chipped away and got it close. And Caris LeVert actually hit the shot late in the fourth quarter that gave them the lead at the time, 113-112, where all of a sudden you felt like, holy crap, like this team, I think LeVert actually hit the shot that tied it too. I think he tied it at 90 originally. That was like the kind of completion of the comeback, and then it was kind of back and forth up until that point where they went to the overtime, tied at 114. But yeah, I mean, it's a testament to the team that JB Bickerstaff's trying to build. And I think, yes, they beat the Celtics. That's impressive in of itself. Like that's great. But to me, like the biggest takeaway from that game was it was against that team, but yeah, they did this. They mounted a comeback and they didn't falter when things got tight, and they could have just laid down and been like, all right, well, they're just the better team tonight. We're going to get ready for the Knicks on Sunday. That game was great. It was phenomenal. You mentioned it being a litmus test. It truly was, I think, a barometer for where this team is at early season. And as you mentioned at the top of the show here, like they're missing one of their best players too. So they did this and took down Boston and got those performances from these guys without one of their other star players. Like that's huge for this team. A nice momentum builder, I think, moving forward, and something that we can look back on and feel like, man, if we play that team again, I think they have a pretty good chance. I'll say this, John. I need that in a 7-game series. That was incredible. Yeah. 7 games of that, like sign me up every single day and twice on Sunday. That's awesome.
Yeah. I sent that out, I think, in the second half, and it was just crossing my mind. And I thought, as they were mounting that comeback in the third quarter, like Donovan had that posterizing dunk, and like they started to make a run and made it interesting. And I thought, this would probably be fun to watch for 7 games. And boy, did the final, 17 minutes really hammer that home. We'll wait to see on an update potentially on Darius Garland today at practice. Going to be heading there here shortly. If you are listening to this, this is like a Saturday edition of the Cavs Insider Podcast, breaking down a big win over the Boston Celtics with Spencer Journeyman. I'm John Rudder. All right. You touched on one thing that I wanted to get to as well. Caris knocking down a couple of clutch shots late. And yes, it was great to see him knock down those shots, but almost what was more impressive to me was like he was down low and like pulled down a rebound late in that game. Like was there, he was in the dirty area where you usually see a Jared Allen or an Evan Mobley or even a Donovan Mitchell that we've seen here in the first couple of games. But he was down low, pulled down an offensive rebound and got them an extra possession, and then made it count himself by knocking down a clutch shot. Like that was just spoke volumes about maybe where he is mentally in the confidences of his game.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a point where I tweeted something where, he was having a great game offensively, but he had a steal at one point that I think led to a bucket for the Cavs. Like he was doing it on both ends. And I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say the steal at the end and then the 5-point play rather to really close it out. I don't know if I've ever really seen one of those. He gets
me neither.
He gets the and one. It's the flagrant one. He gets the extra shot. They get the ball. I was like, this is incredible. We got our cake. We ate it. We came back for seconds. We called our mother over for some. It was incredible.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Like both ends of the floor, he was doing it. And I think that, speaks volumes too, again, just to the mentality that Bickerstaff is instilling in these guys, because listen, that was the last time I think we jumped on a podcast together right before the season started. We were asking, who should be the three, who should be that guy. And ideally you want the prototypical player in that role in today's NBA is a 3-and-D guy, right? Like you want a guy that can knock down the threes and play tough defense on the other end. And we kind of tossed around like, do you want Okoro? Do you want Caris LeVert? Who do you kind of want? If LeVert's going to play that hard on the defensive end, then I think the role fits him well. Now, I will say we saw Dean Wade step in the last 2 games in that 3 spot because Caris kind of moved to the 2. I wonder if that's more so just trying that out while Darius Garland's out and Caris probably still goes back into that 3 spot. But if you're going to get that type of performance on both ends of the floor from Caris, like by all means, like let him stay in that role, let him stay in that position, because he certainly is going to be a contributor if he's doing it on both ends like that. And I will say this too, John, like we talk about defense in the NBA and, there's always the running joke from sort of casual NBA fans or people who think the NBA is not good anymore or whatever, who say like, oh, there's just no defense anymore. I always push back on that a little bit because I think today's scorers are just so much better. Like it's so much harder to play defense. And I think there is some truth to like, yeah, they don't really ramp it up necessarily till the end of the game when it's crunch time and you're in a tight ball game. I get that. But I do think too, like with this Cavs team especially, you add Donovan Mitchell into the mix, this team feels like they have a really good shot. They're also young. Like you think about the LeBron days, right, where those teams did kind of coast and they always talked about flipping the switch. These young guys, I think like they're all bought into like playing hard for each other. Yeah. And so they do, I think, try to play hard on both ends of the floor throughout the most of the games, from start to finish, which is a little bit different than I think what we've seen from past Cavs teams that had, legitimate playoff aspirations. So I think that's good. But I think like having this group together, they're young. You add Donovan Mitchell, you're sending all the right messages of like, we're going for this thing. I think that motivates guys to maybe play a little bit harder on both ends of the floor and, give it their all on the defensive end, even if they're not necessarily the best defensive player throughout the course of their career.
Yeah, and for an early season game, like that gave you everything that you wanted if you're a fan tuning in on a Friday night, right? Yeah. Usually some of those early season games can kind of be clunkers, and that one had everything. I mean, lead changes, posterizing dunks, a big comeback at the end. It was great. You also mentioned kind of the elephant in the room, and we do have a comment kind of asking the question about this from Henrique.
I'm glad they brought this up because I was going to try to go there with you next. So
yeah, and you know what? We had talked about, we mentioned the podcast that we did earlier, and we talked about Caris LeVert. We talked about Isaac Okoro and the roles that they fill, and we know that Okoro brings a more defensive mentality. But Henrique chiming in asking, do you think we should trade Okoro? Look, I'm not positive how much value Okoro would have right now. Another 2-point night, another disappointing night on the offensive end. And, at one point he had more fouls than minutes. I think in the first quarter he had 3 fouls. He played 2.5 minutes. So things just not going right now for Isaac Okoro. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen Caris LeVert take a stranglehold on that role and a guy like Cedi Osman come in and be one of the primary factors off the bench.
Yeah, John, it's unfortunate for Okoro because I know we kind of got into this the first time we jumped on together before the season, but like you wanted to see, and I guess there's still time. I shouldn't say it's sure. The jury's not completely out yet, but I think we're kind of getting there. He has maybe he picks things up, but I think you want to see him take that next step of, we know he can lock down pretty much any defender or any of an opponent's best players that they have on any given night. That's his game. Although last night picking up the 3 fouls wasn't a good start or a good look, but it's the offensive end that kind of needs to come, and we just haven't seen that yet. I think it's who is it? Daryl Morey, I think, who has the quote that like by year 3. You are like, we know who you are in the NBA, and this is it for Okoro, right? Like this is year 3. If he doesn't pick up that offensive intensity, if he can't get the scoring to kind of kick in, then I think we by the end of the season, we will be saying like jury's out on him, or even by the trade deadline, we might be saying the jury's out on him and it's time to move on. you feel for him because I think there was a lot of potential there when they drafted him. He fits this group so well. He's young. He plays the tough defense. Again, going back to the identity that JB Bickerstaff wants for this team, all that. But if you can't get it done on the offensive end and contribute on that end, like, he's almost a wasted body out there. And this is again, I'll fully admit, like, this is coming from a perspective of, I even said on the first pod, like, I kind of like the idea of Okoro being out there as a defensive guy when you have 4 other scorers around him. Now, the injury to Darius Garland's thrown a wrench in that a little bit, but I'm kind of walking that back now just because of how good Caris has been and even how good Jetty has been. And yeah, like, that defense matters, but even in that role where he was out there and, like, yeah, there's some other scorers around you and you can try to, just score where you're needed. He's not really putting up a lot of. He's not giving you a lot offensively, and that's not good on that end of the floor, and it's hurting the Cavs more than helping. So, in terms of trading him, I agree with you. The value's probably not there. You kind of got to wait for, like, late in the year last year, he was on like a great streak where he was like really scoring from behind the arc, especially hitting a lot of threes. I think he shot like 45% to finish the season or something like that from the floor, and like something around that from 3 as well. You got to kind of wait for him to get on one of those runs. Yeah, you got to kind of wait for him to get on one of those runs, and then you can either decide, like, well, is this sustainable for him, or is this the time where we can maybe trade him because we maximize his value and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think right now I'm putting Jetty ahead of him. I'm putting Caris obviously ahead of him. I'm even putting Dean Wade ahead of him, I think, in terms of the rotation. Okoro's kind of playing his way out of this lineup, I think, right now, which is unfortunate.
I thought something that was also very telling was the other night, I believe it was against Orlando. Raul Neto was one of the first guys off the bench in the first quarter. Instead, in a situation where you would think that, okay, you're looking for another ball handler, Okoro has filled that role in the past. Donovan's going to be coming off the floor, and it was Neto that went in instead of him. I thought that kind of really indicated where things were as far as his place in the rotation. Look, we talked about, he's a guy that needs to be able to knock down perimeter shots. He missed 2 wide open looks last night. And he does show like a capability of being able to like score in transition. Like when he gets a bucket in transition, things seems like they kind of flow for him, but he's just never able to get that, or hasn't been able to get that through the first 5 games of the season. And I don't want this to come off as like a negative criticism of him, but if an Evan Mobley or a Jarrett Allen or a Donovan Mitchell or a Darius Garland is maybe having a slow start to a game or a couple of games, the Cavaliers kind of seem like they have some mechanisms to get some instant offense and to have the offense flow through them to get things going. I don't know if that's an option or a possibility for Okoro.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Having Caris out there, like we've mentioned, throughout the show, like, he's instant offense for you as long as he's kind of having one of those good nights, right? Like he can definitely be that scorer. Obviously Donovan Mitchell's been that for sure. So you're kind of missing that with Okoro when he's out on the floor. So I think that's a really good point, because you're right. Not every night it can't be all these guys' nights. Like sometimes some guys are going to have bad games. Sometimes guys are going to have good games. Donovan Mitchell's obviously gotten off to such a hot start. Like he's been on pretty much all 5 games so far. And that probably won't keep up forever, but at some point he'll have Darius Garland back out there to kind of lift his load a little bit. So yeah, it's hard when you don't have, you're missing a body out there that can kind of provide that lift for you if you need it when guys aren't on. So I think that's another good point. And also, bringing up Neto coming off the bench. And the other thing too, like at some point, Ricky Rubio is going to be in this rotation. Like he's coming back from the injury.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Someone just dropped that comment in there as well. Like Rubio is also going to be coming back into this situation, and that's also could potentially mean even less time for him. So thanks to Jim for chiming in on that comment as well.
Yeah. And obviously I would imagine Rubio is like the point guard to lead the second unit. So he comes in. I guess I'm picturing it right now where like Dean Wade's one of the first off the bench. Maybe some depending on the game, maybe it's like Jetty's getting more starters minutes in a game if he's playing really well, or Levert's getting most starters minutes if he's playing really well like last night. Like it could be a mix of either one of those guys coming off the bench. But yeah, I think Okoro's kind of he's kind of fallen into a spot where he's in limbo in terms of where he fits with this rotation and with this team, which again is unfortunate just because of the potential I think he showed, especially in his first season, where you thought like if he can just blossom, if he can just develop on the offensive end, they'll be okay. But it's just not coming for him for whatever reason.
The star of the night, certainly Caris LeVert, 41 points, coming 2 years after he scored 51 on the parquet at Boston. So TD Garden, maybe a happy place that he likes to play at.
That makes me even more excited about a 7-game series then.
So. Right? Yeah, certainly. As we wrap up, anything else you want to get to as the Cavaliers get back home to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse on Sunday? They got 2 games this week, Sunday against the Knicks, and then Wednesday, a rematch against the Boston Celtics at the Fieldhouse. So excitement should be high for that one Wednesday evening before they head out on a little road trip, first long road trip of the season. Any other thoughts or comments that you want to make here as we wrap things up?
Yeah, just that. I mean, that game last night was so good, and you mentioned the Celtics coming to town now here in Cleveland on Wednesday. Like those all these Celtics games now are like must-watch TV for me. Like I got to be glued to it because it just, again, you're trying to sort of they're the standard this year, knowing how far they went a year ago, going all the way to the finals, and you kind of put yourself in the shoes and say, all right, well, where's this team at? So yeah, I mean, early returns in this team, John. I think Donovan Mitchell certainly warranting the MVP chance that he gets on his home court right now. He's probably, again, it's 5 games. We have a long way to go, but 5 games in, you could probably make the case that he is the MVP at this point just for everything he's done. I mean, he's scoring over 30 points a game, and he's just been ridiculous, dishing it out, doing everything. But yeah, I mean, they've lived up to the hype, I guess is what I want to say. Like, yeah. We all had high expectations. We felt pretty good about this. And I think like early returns are making me feel really excited about the 77 games that remain of just following this team. And John, for a city that's kind of having some hard times right now with their football team, it's a nice distraction from all that, right? Like they even as easy as going back to last Sunday, the Browns lose on Sunday, another loss for them, and then the Cavs kind of helped everybody out, gave them some positive, something positive to chew on for Monday morning by winning that game on Sunday night. So yeah, I think there's certainly the buzz in the town right now, and it's a good thing to be a part of. So excited to keep following along, and hopefully you guys do as well with John and I and all of us at Cavs Insider.
Yeah, certainly don't want to say too much, but they are a fun and exciting and easy team to root for here in town. With the win, the Cavaliers off to their best 5-game start since 2016-2017 at 4-1 right now. That team starting 5-0. I think we all liked how that season maybe not ended, but where it went as far as getting back to the finals. Hopefully that kind of sets things up for a nice run of success here on this season with this current group that we have. For the Cavs Insider Podcast, that'll do it for us today. For Spencer German, I'm John Rudder. Appreciate you joining in on us. You can like, subscribe, and follow. Get all the notifications. You can follow us on Twitter at CavsInsider_FN. Heading off to practice now to hopefully maybe get an update on Darius Garland, but we will check back in with you tomorrow evening from Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse when we give you our pregame report after JB Bickerstaff speaks to the media. Again, for the Cavs Insider Podcast, Spencer German, I'm John Rudder. Appreciate you joining us, everybody. We will touch base with you here again very shortly.